All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Take your seats. You're going to have one hell of a show here with Mitchell. My name is Rasheq Zarif. I'm the co-founder and COO of ReWyre, a B2B proptech marketplace, really supporting real estate owners and operators in finding the right proptech for the right project. Here we are honored to have Mitchell Moinian from the Moinian Group. I'll give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mitchell Moinian. Like Rasheq mentioned, happy to be here. Thank you again, and thank you to my friend Ricky Chira for inviting me. Really briefly, if you're not familiar with our company, it's the Moinian Group. It's founded 40 years ago. We are a private New York City-based real estate development and ownership company that owns and builds residential buildings, commercial buildings, hotel projects in New York City, in California, in South Florida, and some other markets. And we're also very active in the tech and prop tech space, as well as other things. So happy to be here and talk about it with you all.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Mitchell. And I mean, the Moinian Group is one of the largest private real estate investment groups out there in the world. And this is why it's great to have you here today to talk about how PropTech is going to transform fragmented industries such as real estate. First question is, with your company, how have you approached in building projects or building PropTech within your projects that you've been working on in the last years?
So we have right now about 9 different projects in different phases of development, mostly in New York City. And like I mentioned, there are hotels, there are offices, there are apartment buildings, there are all different kinds of things. We're always looking for, as we go, what the best prop tech solutions or additions can be in every project. And it's actually not such a simple thing, which we'll talk about, which is why, for example, ReWyre is actually a great platform that I've learned a lot about recently. But the thing with development is you don't design or plan a building in a day. It can take a year, it could take 2 years, it could take 3 years, and from the time you start until the time you're actually done with the plans, there could be 500 new solutions or technology products that have developed or been delivered to the market. So we're always keeping on top of what's the latest and greatest way to do that. And a lot of that is from things that are development solutions and pre-development solutions. A lot of those are things about the operation of the building, the construction of the building, because obviously, as you guys all know, that there's, prop tech touches everything, every aspect of real estate. So we're always looking, for every single layer of a project that we can introduce something to.
You recently started an excavation on your new project here in the Chelsea Art District, right? At what phase in the entire development do you start thinking about bringing in prop tech? Like, at what point is prop tech a consideration?
So like I was saying, if you're planning a building, there's prop tech for that, right? And I'm sure a lot of you guys deal with it or work with these companies, but there's software for the planning of the building, there's software for the mapping out of the building, there's software for, we just built a VR model of the building that you're talking about, which is called the Hudson Arts Building. It's a 200,000 square foot Class A office building. We built a full VR model for the entire building head to toe, so you can literally walk the entire building with 3D goggles on and see exactly what it looks like inside out. So even way before the building exists, we're looking at prop tech solutions or other software solutions. And then as you go, during construction, you're obviously looking at prop tech solutions. So we have like I mentioned, we have a venture platform called Currency M at the Moinian Group. It's been active for about 8 years now in tech and prop tech. And this is not a plug, but just to answer your question, but one of the solutions, one of our companies is called Onsite IQ, which is a 3D construction site mapping company, where every floor plan has a comprehensive 3D tour and so on and so forth of the progress ongoing during construction. So that's an example of, as you're going, what the prop tech is. And then finally, once the building is obviously open, then you have all kinds of tenant experience, management solutions, just general experience solutions, which could be entry solutions, lighting, HVAC, all the things that you guys know, and all the things that ReWyre can help you find. and they're all very important. So every single part of the life cycle of a project, from conception to occupancy, all has different kind of needs for PropTech, and we like to look for all of them.
We'll talk a little bit about currency M, but before I do, I'm going to read this here. Your company's been recently quoted as saying that there's been a flight to quality, particularly in commercial real estate. What role does PropTech have in delivering quality, and what other assets or what other opportunities are in delivering that?
So what Rasheq is talking about is how obviously there's a big kind of dilemma with the office and going back to the office. A lot of you guys are in the office today, but that's for a different reason. But there's a lot of that going on, obviously. And what New York City and other markets have been seeing is that actually the office market is okay in many ways, but not in every way yet, if you have a quality asset, right? Class A buildings, which are typically glassier, brand new, or retrofitted recently, or so on and so forth, they are actually doing well or really well. We have some Class A buildings that actually command higher prices now than they did before COVID, right? Some of them are a few blocks away from here. And my point, to answer your question there about what tech has done there, those tenants are seeking the best of the best. That's the bottom line. And the best of the best is several things. So obviously the building has to be beautiful and designed beautifully and has to be in a great location. But then there's obviously the modern versions of the best of the best, which is what kind of amazing applications they have, what kind of amazing technology do they have. Do you have the latest in, facial recognition in your lobby? Do you have the latest in, in elevator experience? Do you have the latest in lighting controls? Do you have the latest in HVAC controls, air purification? Connectivity, obviously, Wi-Fi, things of those nature. And that's all part of the Class A package. So, basically having a fully loaded building, so to say, with tech and PropTech solutions and things that are not even deep tech, simple things, are basically what they expect. And you can't really be so Class A these days without it. It's a new facet to what a Class A building is.
You talked a lot about the office space and how tech is important there, but it's also very critical on the multifamily side, right? And I think there's different types of tech that could be applied for different applications, but multifamily is one where we're starting to see more and more traction. What do you see more investments going towards? Is it equal across all the different facets of real estate, or is it there more going in one versus the other?
I think that, so I can't speak for every category, but again, commercial, residential, hospitality. For example, we don't do industrial real estate, which is a whole kind of animal of its own when it comes to technology that I'm not really involved in. I don't really know much about, so I won't speak about that. But between the three that we work with, I think they're very different. So I think that commercial is always the slowest to adapt. Those buildings are usually the kind of what I call the heaviest. They're the oldest. The people behind them are usually the most conservative, and they're kind of catering to companies, and companies do their own thing when it comes to having things that they want or need. They implement them themselves. So if a company thinks they should have XYZ product or PropTech, they kind of implement it themselves, and that's what companies have always done typically. Residential multifamily is a little different and a little bit more demanding or commanding, because those are based on individual renters. And individual renters are more dynamic and they're more outspoken, to be honest. And they change every year, more or less. While an office can be there for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, it's a little bit more stagnant. Multifamily renters come in, come out, and then you have a new person who has a whole new wish list or set of expectations, and that keeps multifamily landlords kind of on their toes. Right? Oh my God, look at this whole new swath of renters. They're expecting a whole new thing that we didn't have for the last generation, let's say, which was only a year or two before. And then there's hospitality, which I think is the most exciting, honestly, because hospitality is always looking for the next thing. Office certainly is never looking for the next thing, multifamily in the middle, but hospitality, your big brands, your Marriotts, your Hiltons, so on and so forth, they're basically the companies that control the majority of the hotel rooms around the world. They are all looking for the latest and greatest, most exciting thing that they can appeal to their customers, because just like offices are 5 or 7 or 10 years, renters are 1 or 2 or 3 years, these guys are actually dealing with tenants that are only 1 or 2 or 3 days, right? So they only have their attention for this really small amount of time and really need to stay on their toes to find the latest thing to keep them hooked and keep them coming back. So I think there's always been a lot of interest and demand from hospitality leaders, and I think it's great. And that's why every time you go to a room, you're always noticing something different or new, and what's next to the bed, or what's on top of the fridge, or in the pantry, or the check-in, or the app. Doesn't really happen in the other sectors. But in terms of total volume and total dollars, at the end of the day, they're all going to be huge, and it's just kind of how it's been going these days, I think.
It is quite exciting and to see how proptech is proliferating across real estate, but the challenge is that it's still quite fragmented. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the challenges on fragmentation with the real estate industry. So first things first, like yesterday, Scott from RXR was here talking about how he's invested into View, how he's building his own application. We've heard from Hines, we've heard from BlackRock, EQ Office. Everyone's doing their own thing. Does that really help the industry, or is it just further facilitate fragmentation?
Good question. I mean, I think what we're seeing, so two things. Fragmentation, we were talking about this earlier. It's really important, and it should not be underappreciated that real estate is very fragmented in terms of the stakeholders behind it, right? We have 20 companies in our current CM kind of tech venture universe. And with every single one, I've always spoken about how important it is to acknowledge the makeup of our different customers, right, or the consumers, right? Majority, we just spoke about this, but the majority of buildings in New York City, not by a lot, but the majority of buildings in New York City are owned by small landlords, so to say, right? They own one walk-up, two, maybe something along those lines, and then institutional owners are the minority, but obviously not in a small way. And thinking about the difference between the two and the propensity between the two is very important. So it is a big part of real estate, and it's why I think real estate is basically the slowest moving or slowest adapting industry in the world when it comes to tech. It's one of the oldest industries in the world. We're still in a city where the average building is 75 years old. They're still going into buildings where you feel like you're in 1985. It's very normal to feel that way because real estate is such a slow-moving business because you have such a fragmented makeup or fabric of owners. Now, on the other side, you also have something else, which is you have these big stakeholders coming together with companies, right? So we have a company, our latest and greatest from current CM is a company called Built Rewards, which you may or may not have heard of, but it's a rewards program for renters. Where we have, a rewards program, we have a credit card with MasterCard, we have Wells Fargo as our bank, and basically we have, I think, some of the greatest multifamily owners in America as part of our partnership. So this is a rewards program for renters. That was step one, and then step two is we went to, Starwood Capital, Blackstone, the Moinian Group, Related, Cushman & Wakefield, Greystone, Greystar, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of something else. Greystar, you name it, we have about 10 million units of apartments represented in our ownership group, right? And why I'm saying that is, and I only mentioned like 5 out of maybe 20, and these are all the biggest blue chip companies in American multifamily real estate. Because there's also this movement of landlords coming together, knowing with their knowledge what is actually next. Right? What does make sense for the market? What is something that should be brought to the market? And they're kind of proving that by putting their money into these companies, using these companies, and so on and so forth, and putting them up front. That's something Scott Reckler very smartly does with his company for sure, and it's something we've done on our side as a venture business, but also as a landlord company, teaming up with other institutional owners to position companies in the forefront, knowing that we may know a little bit more about what might work in real estate, technology in real estate than a non-real estate person. So there's definitely a kind of collective effort there.
Yeah. With Currency M, and specifically with Built Rewards, and just for reference for those who haven't seen it in the news, 2 weeks ago, Built Rewards raised $150 million at a $1.5 billion valuation. It's one of the fastest growing companies out there in the proptech space. But you built a strategic partnership with them last summer when they weren't as big. I'm not going to ask you for your secret sauce here, but like, what is it that how do you
We're
define?
in the circle of trust here. I trust everybody here. You can ask me whatever you
All right,
want.
then what is
Turn
your
off your cameras.
what is your social security number? No, but it's like how did you find them, and like especially with the other companies, what is it that you're looking for that where you say like this is a company that's going to be game changing in the prop tech space?
So it's actually a little bit more interesting than that, in that the company, so in the news, we formed a strategic alliance with them a year and 4 months ago. And again, the company's called Built Rewards, BILT. But actually, the company was founded by one of my partners and close friends, and I was his partner in founding the company about 3 years ago. So we started the company together 3.5 years ago. While he was one of the heads of Rhino, which is another company of ours, if you know, security deposit solutions company, which does great, and I recommend everyone check that out. And basically, he came to me with some kind of idea, intention about what we can do with rentals and rental business, which is a big part of my DNA and what I do every day. And long story short, after lots of ideation and effort and so on and so forth, we came around to the concept of Built Rewards, which started out as one thing and then evolved to another thing and another thing and another thing, and then became what it is today, which is this big platform for rent payment processing, rewards, points, credit card with MasterCard that gets you points on paying rent, something no one else does, and that's how that actually happened. So it wasn't just a landlord partnership, but I actually helped start the company. Now, what was the key there? It was really something that, you always say, I think some of the best ideas is how does that not exist, right? So every time someone asks me, Mitch, what are you working on, or what's Built about, or so on and so forth, I said it's the first and only credit card in the country that you actually earn points when you pay rent. That's like my one sentence thing. I could talk about it obviously much more. That was the one sentence. And I always got the same reaction. Whoa. Every single time, right? Like, you can do that? That doesn't exist, so on and so forth. Yes, doesn't exist. Well, it does now. And, so something, I know it sounds really simple, but that's kind of one of the key fundamental things you're always looking for. It's always those obvious ideas. Rent is a $450 billion a year business in the United States, right? Anyone here who's in the multifamily business knows that 1%, 2%, 3% of people actually use a credit card to do it, as they should not, because of the fees and so on and so forth. And so we went ahead and attacked that, and I won't get into detail, but we attacked that by making these partnerships with MasterCard, no fees when you pay rent, earning points, so that once this was basically the bottom line, and why I loved it. I said to people, and this is how I had to sell it to people. Now people are banging down our door to get it into their companies, into their portfolios, but we had to really sell people. And during COVID, by the way, and I said, you go to Starbucks, you get a cappuccino, you get a bunch of Starbucks stars. You go on JetBlue, you spend $300, you get a bunch of JetBlue points. You spend $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year on rent, and you actually get nothing, obviously, besides your four walls. You get nothing beyond that. Meanwhile, you do for everything else. And something's got to give. And so we saw that as a big opportunity to kind of hit something special, and I think we have. And like you said, we had good news a few weeks ago, and hopefully that's just the beginning.
It's interesting that you say that, where it's almost like, duh. Like, why is there not a credit card for rent and rewards program? It's very similar to how Ricky Scherer, our mutual friend, and also, for those who don't know, Ricky Scherer is my partner with
that guy
ReWyre.
right there. Raise your hand, Ricky.
Yeah, there you go, Ricky. Of Crown Acquisitions, also a real estate investment group. But he got very, very frustrated with procuring prop tech for his real estate. And it was just like, why isn't there just a simple way? Why is there not an Amazon or an eBay of procuring prop tech? I mean, there's 8,000 different companies out there. And what we found out, why it's not easy is because it's not as simple as just buying. It's like, you got the integrator coming to the site, doing the site visits, and then everyone has a different combination of how things come together, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. We're seeing some of the large REITs trying to apply the same technology across the board, but every property type is different. And so it's been challenging to kind of crack that nut and solve it, but once you do, it's like, duh, like why not?
Yeah, I agree, and I'll just add, I think this is very important for us because it's been important since day one when we got into this business, into the venture business. we always look for really fundamental real businesses, right? I'm not an investor, unfortunately, in ReWyre, but that's, for example, a very strong fundamental business. It's a marketplace, it's connecting A to B, getting you something you need, no hocus pocus, no kind of fantastical, ideas about what life should be like, or it's a marketplace that buys you building services that turns into a coin or something like that, which obviously makes no sense. Things of that nature. And we always look for real businesses, right? Every business we got into really had to be a good, strong, fundamental business. I don't know about AR as much or things of that nature because I'm not a scientist. So we look for things that are very simple. So Built was actually that, even though it might be complicated when I describe it, but we have companies like, one of our first companies was Paint Zen. It was a paint service provider, not too dissimilar actually in some ways, paint services provider that was sold to a public company that was tech enabled. And this was 7, 8 years ago. So paint services, but not yellow pages and not asking your neighbor. Simple. We liked it. Another company of ours is, and very much involved in growing, is called Moved. Moving services, move-in services, move-in portals, and so on and so forth for tenants, right? Not 50 emails with the management team and when am I moving in, this and that, right? Everything is done now on your phone, but real estate is just slow, and we're looking at that gap and seeing what is the thing that's going to bridge that gap. Right, so Moved was a good example of that bridge the gap for sure, and Rhino and Onsite IQ, the scanning company. So a lot of kind of very direct, obvious things, I'd say, that we think are strong and very useful, and that's the key for us.
A lot of people don't know that myself, I've not been in the real estate industry for long. In fact, my entire career has been on the automotive and mobility side. I led innovation at Mercedes-Benz for many years. And one of the challenging parts of that, then was you have a vehicle that is out on the road for a decade. And the life cycle starts in building that 5 to 7 years before. And we always had the challenge of how do we implement technology into a pretty heavy, expensive asset. And it was very tough. It was very, very tough to crack that nut. And also you had this competition of a lot of other tech companies trying to find ways to get into the vehicle. And I thought, wow, that's it. We solved it, or it's getting there depending on which car brand you have, but it's getting there. And then I got deeper into real estate because the challenges are similar. We're talking about assets that are sitting around for 10, 15, 20 years before you even get it to be retrofitted or upgraded. So a question for you is, when you look at proptech installation into a building, how do you know in 5, 7, 8 years that it was the right investment?
Investment using the product, or investment in terms of investing in the company?
Not put currency aside for a moment. In having the product in the building.
Well, the short answer is we're going to find out a lot about that soon, because that 5 to 7 years is like now. So that's one thing, because 4, 5, 7 years ago, we met with a lot of companies 5 or 7 years ago. I won't name names, but let's just say door handles and sensors and scanners and things like that. And we didn't really feel like a lot of them were ready at this point in time. So there was a little bit of preemptive conclusion making back then. And now, it's a tough question. It's tough. We're going to have to see. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of evolution. There's going to be certainly a lot of evolution, because it's just like anything else in technology. Your phone.